All right, the Toucan Echo Podcast is back for 2022. Thank you for tuning in, either on audio or video. I'm James, and I'm going to be talking about reflecting on, I guess, the release of our new album, Headless, Restless, in more of a kind of process, like why we did an album and what we learnt from it and what we're going to do next sort of thing. Bit of mindset stuff, bit of music nerding, all the stuff you come to expect from the Toucan Echo Podcast. If you're new tuning in, hi, welcome. The reason that we do this podcast alongside like our jam content or like our releases on Spotify and that kind of thing is like, this is more about the journey of the creative kind of process and marketing and building a band and like the mindset that it takes, and sometimes like a dig into more like musician sort of stuff, like how you get guitar tones, and I get to nerd out a little bit as well. And influences like basically me ranting about Jack White and the Beatles. There's a few episodes on that if you want it. So it's a bit of a mix of a few things. It's a little, it can be a bit unstructured, but yeah, it's a more of a deeper dive into sort of the how and the why, rather than literally us saying we've got this new song, because there's plenty of places you can check out our songs if that's of interest. But yes, I thank you for tuning in, because this is the deep stuff. So if you're here, I really appreciate that you've gone this far, found this corner of the internet. It's awesome. So our first one for 2022, because we've been focusing on releasing our new record, Headless, Restless, which is now out. I'm recording this on beginning of March, and our record came out on the 25th of February on streaming, and we did a bit of a backstage behind the scenes thing before that for our email list as well. So yeah, the album is finally out. It didn't actually take us like that long to do an album compared to like a big established band. Like, I think we started working on this at least like properly. We're recording an album and we're starting to do pre-production, that kind of thing, in February 2021. So about a year ago. But the songs were written probably in the year leading up to it, and a few of them were written like while we were recording the album. So it's been a long old journey, and I guess it's like a slightly unusual thing to do in 2022 to release an album as like a small band. So I'm just going to talk about like why we did it, what we learned from it, what we're going to do next, that sort of stuff. So why did we decide to do it in the first place? Like, why, if you're kind of up and coming band, can I call us an up and coming band? I don't know. But why would you make an album rather than do singles or whatever? And there's a few reasons, but like the main reason for us to do it is these songs fit. We had this bunch of songs. We had a lot of songs, so we had to do something with them, and we wanted to release them all rather than just pick like one or two best ones and do singles kind of thing. We wanted to get all of these out there. They were quite eclectic. They ranged like they all had different influences and different sounds and different feel, but they did have this like arc that reflected a kind of dark to light sort of journey in them. And so we would debate. We had we've done an album before called Walk to Circus, which is a very different process and a very different kind of stage of the band. It's still cool. And it's got some songs that we still play, today. But it's a very different sound to what the band's kind of developed into. And we keep it, we're going to keep it up there to show that stage of development. But it's a lot more, Walk to Circus is a lot more electronic kind of produced. Like, it's all MIDI and plugging into the laptop and experimenting with sounds in a pure, like, not trying to play them live kind of setting. Whereas this one, Headless, Restless, comes after we've done, basically between those two albums, we've done a couple of EPs of us playing live and like singles, that kind of thing. So yeah, I think we were building up to another kind of some more studio released tracks. It was time for it. But yeah, we did an album because these songs just fit together like well enough into an album. When we literally like wrote them all on pieces of paper, put them out on the floor, and started arranging them into a track list, and thought, actually, you know what? We've got something a bit bigger here than just like a bunch of singles. We've got like a journey, and we can actually. I think the album is an album is the best way for us to kind of take get the most potential out of this set of songs, rather than, it's almost like when they're so diverse in sounds and stuff, it's quite hard to keep releasing them as singles and for it to like make sense. Whereas an album, like, you have a bit, for some reason, putting it all together as one, you have a bit more like leeway to have album tracks, but like some catchier songs, some like more exploratory songs. Whereas if you release them all as singles, you felt like you'd have to promote like an instrumental track or something. But that might just, maybe people would accept singles like that. But for us, it just seemed to like, it was like, oh, we've got these songs, we got opportunities to make them like gapless, to make this into like a more than just a set of songs, like I sort of say a concept album, but like, yeah, one long, they work together as a big set rather than single songs, I guess. It brought more out of the whole thing. So, and it was the way that, and it excited us. It excited us to be like more ambitious than before, like to go, oh, we can make a gapless album, we can almost make a concept album here. We can wrap all of these like different influences into one thing and kind of package it up. And that was just more exciting than the alternative for us, I guess. So we did it. And it sort of started off by us doing rehearsals of the songs to play them like just as two-piece live, where we kind of hammered out the sections and stuff, and then we both took a week off work to record the drums, and had an intense week tracking the drums in like March 2020. And then sort of from that point on, it becomes a lot more of like layering, and I do a lot more of the instrumental stuff because I have to do bass, guitars, vocals, and then Harry helps make Harry sort of collaborates on the way in terms of like decisions of different sounds, or like if we need to change any bits of the songs, or like add percussion or other instruments. And he does we both did like bits of backing vocals and stuff. So but at the same time, a lot of it is after March 2020 through to Feb is a lot of me in a room trying to like work out where to go next, because working out bass parts, like I don't usually play bass, so this is a real like journey in my bass playing and stuff like that. So yeah, to sum up, we decided to make an album because we felt it was like a way to up our ambition for this set of songs. It was the most exciting sort of way to release for us, and perhaps something that will serve us like in the longer term rather than the shorter term. But I'll get onto that and like reflecting about the album in a sec. But so yeah, and then unless I said this already, like we record it all at home, all ourselves. We don't go to a studio. I mix and master it. We produce all the tracks, we arrange them. Like it's a real like DIY sort of thing, but we try and make it sound as like professional as possible without being over polished as well. Like to keep it kind of, it's this balance of like humanity plus and sounding not like it was recorded in a basement or whatever. So yeah, it's a really, really rewarding thing, but difficult. It's like it pushes your ability in like multiple fronts all at once. Like Harry had to record like the best drum tracks he did, and then once he's done that and I pick up a bass, I'm going like, oh, my bass playing is like not good enough for these drum tracks, so I've got to like improve as I'm going along, or like really put thought and effort and multiple takes in many cases to get bass line that is going to like support the rest of the song. So that is the challenge of being like two-piece and doing all the instruments. You have to kind of be a bit of a jack of all trades, but try and not let yourself down with any of the parts that you put on, which is why it took quite a long time. But we were doing it part-time as well outside of jobs, so I would recommend it because it pushed us to become better at a lot of things. More than singles, I don't know, but like just something about that big project, it really like pushes to the next level. But the flip side of that is that it's like hard. It takes hours and hours and hours of concentration, of like setbacks sometimes, frustration, like tiredness, blisters on my fingers. Like literally, I put that in a marketing thing and it was actually true. So yeah, it's like, I don't know, training for a marathon or something, but like the end result is a set of songs. So I don't know if I would recommend it to everyone. This just like the set of songs we had, just it felt right to make an album. So there's not really advice for like other bands or whether they should do singles or album. There's a strong argument to do singles and smaller releases because you can kind of keep up your promotion. Because I guess the downside of what we did, although the upside is like, I think it was the best way to do the songs and it pushed us to be a lot better. The downside is that like some of our promotion that was gathering a bit of steam in early 2021, where we'd done a couple of singles and it felt like we were starting to connect with a bit of a fan base, that we had to go a bit quiet because we were literally sat like recording, and a mistake I made is that like I didn't really like videoing myself recording because I was really like actually trying to work out what I was going to play, and I felt like I would have like hours and hours of video just me going nowhere that I'd never like be able to edit because it would just be too much. But I regret that a little bit because that's part of the journey that you want to show fans. So it's harder to keep sort of awareness and stuff up when you're sinking yourself into a project like that, which I think is why big artists like disappear for a year, because they literally just hide away and have to work out like what they want to talk about, what they want to play, what's going on, you know, in terms of their musical like ambitions and stuff. So yeah, it's a hard thing to do without like someone helping you to keep promoting, and it's just the two of us who do all of this stuff in Toucan Echo. So the downside is that we maybe lost a bit of momentum like publicly, but as like musicians and stuff, and like artistically, we were developing massively, just not in public. So maybe that was something that I would try and improve next time, of how we can get a better balance of those two things. But it's done, it's out. Not like a big splash or anything when it was released. Like it's just, it's mostly going to our existing fans, and they're kind of getting used to it, getting time to listen to it, whatever. The whole 50 minutes, that kind of thing. But I think what we have created is like, and one thing you get with an album is like an asset that can serve you over the longer term, because someone can come across our music in like a year's time or something and go, oh, I like this song. Oh, look, this song was on this record. Like I've now got the next step deeper all in one place. Whereas what I find personally as a music fan with singles is that like I'm kind of hopping around potentially different kind of different styles, like quite far apart. If I like a certain song and I see it's on an album, I get quite excited as a music fan, because I'm like, oh, this is part of a set. I might really like this set. And albums that you really like for like hardcore music fans are huge. Like you get that's where you get like a real deep connection with an artist, is kind of through an album that you can sit and like spend an hour in that artist's sort of world of that time. So they're great. If you did a whole career based on albums, they're great like signposts that of different eras of that artist's career, of different times in their life. Whereas singles can kind of, there's something a little bit disposable about them, at least in terms of like rock music or whatever, where you're not looking to like chart and like get the single to pay back. Don't know, but after all of that, yes, we have finished it, and it's a great place to be. And if you haven't had a listen, go and check it out. I couldn't even recommend a track to you because people seem to be warming to different tracks, which is very cool. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you think. Email me at james@toucanecho.com if you've got any thoughts. We've had some amazing like people message us with like proper detailed like reviews of each track, calling out which ones are their favorites. Like it's awesome. And I mean, we've talked about it on the podcast before, but I should also say that like we're a two-piece band, me and Harry, and live we play as two-piece. I do sort of stuff to fill out the bass frequencies and that kind of thing, but the studio we approach quite differently to the live stuff. The studio, we almost make the songs as if we're a full band, so we don't like limit ourselves to playing two-piece live like in the studio to try and like match our live stuff. We actually purposely make them really different, like a different version of the same song. So these are almost like the fully produced full band versions of the songs, but then like when we take that same song live, we have to kind of reimagine it a little bit, And some of them are quite close to studio versions when we play them live if they're like simpler songs, and other ones like we have to kind of get quite creative in how we play them live as stripped down to people where I can't layer like 10 guitars and that kind of thing. So yeah, we purposely treat the studio quite differently, and I recommend this to other bands because I think I think it's just a great, like, it's difficult to maybe market and brand that sometimes, but it just adds like intrigue and is more exciting as well to like not just play the same, try and carbon copy your studio version or carbon copy your live act. There'll be people that disagree with me on this, but I'm a big fan of like 60s bands who got really creative in the studio, and like sitting down to listen to them is just a different experience to going to see that band live. I know it's a compliment that they said, oh, they sounded just like the record, but if you're not trying to prove that you didn't use loads of studio magic, you're actually using them as two different creative outlets, I'm confident that that's the right thing, so that's what we do. So what next? We're kind of in that period where, you know, we've literally just released it like last week, so it's like, what do we do now? But to be fair, we actually have been writing a lot during the making of this album, because we've still been practicing a fair amount and kind of jamming new stuff and improvising, so we just keep coming up with new ideas. It's almost a bit surreal, we almost go in with the expectation now of going into practice. They're like, oh, there's going to be a new song come out of this, because it just is flowing, and lots of really cool ideas that we can't wait to release. We may go to singles for a bit to kind of change it up, or do EPs, do smaller releases, because we've done like a decent amount of promotion around the album, and my feeling is that we've got quite a few people who've seen our music or engaged to like a small degree, but we want to kind of take that to the next level in terms of engaging with our fan base, engaging with these people who've shown an interest, if you get what I mean. I think we're good at getting our music out there, but then we want to build something bigger than like just spamming people with the music. We want to kind of like a two-way connection with our fan base, because that's like what we enjoy the most, what I as a music fan enjoy the most with bands. So yeah, it's going to be more concentrated on kind of building that community, and a lot of musicians like our music, so it's just great for us to just nerd out about music. And I think we'll go do like smaller releases. One thing we've debated is whether we're going to track more stuff live, because this record is layered and produced, but we did 2 tracks on it, one called Tatami and one called Tokyo Fire Dance Illusions, where we actually played the core tracks like together live, and that drum track plus guitar track that we recorded while we were playing as a 2-piece with like what on the final record, just with more layers added, and we think that added quite a lot of vibe to those tracks. It felt it was a good blend of like the two worlds of like not just being like not just being limited to what we can play on the spot as 2 people, but also it had that energy plus the sort of production. So I think our future records are going to explore a bit of that, and we may even go and record in a studio, because we've recorded at home for years and years now. I've not been in a studio for 5 years, something like that, like an actual recording studio. So we may do a few singles, but kind of tie it into like a bit of like video sort of documentary about going to a recording studio. And you can also learn quite a lot from doing that. So we're reflecting on potentially doing singles or EPs, having me just said the whole reason that we did an album. We may change our mind and do an album again, but and we might go and record in studios to get out of like the home studio mindset. Maybe we'll mix it at home or record just the drums in a studio or something like that. But we've got lots of cool tracks to come up, and we want to start playing live again. We actually went to a jam night. So we live in Leeds now, or just outside of Leeds in the like north of the UK, which we moved to out of London. And we went to our first sort of jam, like improv kind of night where just musicians turn up and kind of try and make some music together on the spot, which is that's our vibe, man. That's how we play as two people. So that was really, really, really sick. So we're going to be doing a bit more of that, going to like open mic nights and that kind of thing. Yeah. Can see Harry at the You're on the podcast.
Sick.
Oh, for real. So yeah, what else did I say I was going to talk about? Lost my train of thought. So yeah, we did a jam night yesterday. We want to get back playing gigs. So I'm going to reach out to our various fan bases, particularly in the UK, because that's where we're going to start off, and get, if they want to see us play live, we need to know about it so it can help us like book a gig. But yeah, get back playing live, get back like making some jam videos, which have been very popular with our fans. So that's kind of the next thing. So it's going to be more of a mix of quite a few things coming up. That is what is going to be next. And what another like big thing that I got from doing this jam night yesterday was just the vibe of like being around other musicians. Like I'm really really ready to step more and more into doing creative stuff. There's something about like the move that has triggered a bit of freedom to just like be even more creative than before, because I know like on this podcast we talk about that a lot, like the creative journey or the mindset required, or you know, and that's like a main topic of the podcast. But actually in the sort of day-to-day world, when you've got to like balance your job and that kind of thing, it's hard to keep at it. It's work to keep at it, and you don't necessarily like get encouraged to do it all the time. And that's part of the reason I do the podcast, to kind of cultivate what I think to be true, but you don't necessarily hear in the world all the time about like the creative journey and being artistic and that kind of thing. But yeah, it was great to go and just hang out with other musicians, which we don't do, like, you know, we haven't done nearly enough, I guess, up to this point. Yeah, that was great, and maybe we'll end up doing some more like collaborations and stuff this year. You never know. Speaking of collaborations, there's one of our sort of first ones on the album where we got my friend Maya, who kind of comes from a classical music like background, studied like orchestration. We got her to arrange some strings for one of our songs called Ride the River, which like takes it absolutely to the next level in the studio version. So take a look at that if you want to see the ambition that I was talking about on the new record. Yeah, then what else did I promise? Music nerd stuff. Listening to a lot of records right now. I'm sitting next to the record collection, and I'm really enjoying just we're kind of going on like I mean, hopefully it's not weekly because I go bankrupt, but we're going on like regular vinyl shops right now, buying new records each week. I'm picking like random ones of different types of music, which is exciting but expensive. So it's not something I can necessarily do forever. But I yeah, really exploring like just record sessions and sitting down listening to like old music, new music. I like buying sort of African music or South American music, like to just get like a new set of influences, I guess, particularly like random vinyls that you may not have stumbled across on Spotify. Like going to a record shop is quite a different thing to a algorithm. It's kind of curated by someone else's taste, and it can be unpredictable. You can run into like more unpredictable stuff. So I recommend people getting into vinyl and going to record shops if you're a music fan. Maybe you all are already, but it's just, yeah, to actually see it like tangible in so much of music and life is like streamed right now. Tangible stuff is the way forward. And what else? Guitar nerdery. So yeah, one funny thing that I'm finding from being by the way, if you don't care about guitar, you can tune out of the podcast now, because I'm just going to talk about like guitar tone, because we jump around on the podcast. Where are we at the moment? I've talked about the album, why we did an album, that we benefited from learning a lot from it. but our promotion's a bit down, so we're going to go and do like a few singles and things and kind of concentrate on a bit more balance of a few different things rather than sinking all our energy into an album. Talked about we went to a jam night, and like kind of hanging out with other musicians is really good for the creative mindset, and kind of keeping on the path of being artistic when the world doesn't necessarily think that's a good idea. And that we're doing record shops, and I recommend just going into record shops, and I don't just buy them completely randomly. I actually listen to like 5 seconds on Spotify, and if I think it sounds cool, I buy it. I go for it. And maybe buy like 1 or 2. So that's my kind of expanding my musical horizons right now. And then yes, I promised some sort of guitar nerdery. What I used to record all the tones on the album, the guitar tones, and the bass as well, was the Kemper Profiler, which I thought was quite well known in the guitar community. But since we've moved up to Leeds, no one's heard of it. Everyone's like, what is that? They see it and they go like, what is this space age alien technology that you are bringing around? And I don't know why, but yeah. So I basically what I've used for guitar tone for the past couple of years is the Kemper Profiler, which is like a bit of technology some clever Germans invented in 2010, where you can mic up a guitar amp, so you put a microphone in front of it, put it through a preamp, and then send loads of crazy sounds through it, like. And that can like capture the response of the amp at different volumes and different frequencies, to the point where like you can then play a profile of that amp, which is basically like a sort of a digital copy of it that sounds like 90-something% the same. So I bought one of those for, it's quite expensive, but you can use it live in the studio, and you can basically buy 10 quid profiles of like any amp that you want. So in the studio, it's just incredibly good, because you can, with like a flick of a switch, swap to the same amp on different tone on the same amp, or a completely different amp. So the way that I actually ended up recording guitars on the album was literally just kind of sitting and finding a tone for, say, one rhythm guitar, then swapping guitars, swapping amps, and that kind of leading to quite a wide sound, and really being able to be quite like specific on the sounds that I wanted for each part. Like you could really kind of tweak, perhaps even more so than you could with a real amp, just because it's digital, and in my opinion not sacrificing the sound like at all, basically. It's a different playing experience to a real amp, but that's not a criticism, because in the real world, when you use amp, they're always mic'd up, or 90% of the time they're mic'd up. So that's the sound that the Kemper captures, and replicates really, really, really well. Perhaps better than you could mic up in like the real world, like in a kind of busy, smoky club, whatever. Like this is kind of a well mic'd up amp sound. But I'm also getting back into playing my real guitar amp, which I've still got, which is a 2-rock. Which is a beautiful, beautiful amp. It sounds incredible. And the sort of playing experience in the room with that amp is just like stellar. It sounds so good. And the Kemper can get really close, man. Really close to that. Like, to think how, I've got a kind of cheaper, probably the cheapest 2-rock that you can get, but they go up to like thousands and thousands of pounds. And like, all I can say is like, from profiles of my amp, is that it captures the important things about it, captures the feel, the vibe, the like spirit, I guess, that makes that amp great, and it captures it and recreates it perfectly. So yeah, Kemper's an incredible piece of technology, and it has been an absolute dream to use that in the studio. And I actually quite like the process of having to get the sound up front and not being able to tweak it with a plugin. So I did a few guitar parts with a plugin when I didn't have my Kemper like available, and that was kind of cool because you could like tweak the sound a bit to make it fit in the mix. But when you're earlier stage building the track, like it's a cliche, but there is like just something good about having to get your sound as you're going and build in the track based on those decisions, rather than like, I'll just DI it and build the whole track at the end, because like what you lay down before influences what comes later. it kind of can set a direction or not, and like to not set that direction at any point, I think it's too much to do at once at the end. Like, you can do it, and sometimes that flexibility becomes really useful. But for me, like, even though the Kemper, like, I didn't even record like DI things to go back. I just like chose my tones as I went, and it worked great. It sounds spectacular. And I'm sort of, even though you can have like any amp, I guess live I'm actually settling on like less and less amps. It's funny, like in the studio I kind of would use a more diverse range of amps because of the way we make the album, like layering different stuff. But live, it's actually like I'll set up kind of things for us to jam over with very similar sounding, if not the same amp, to keep it in like the same territory. Otherwise I felt like there was more chance of me jumping around in tones and volumes that just didn't benefit playing live as much. Felt like more of a consistent sound live for me worked better. But that's also because you can't change guitars, and certain amps work well with different guitars. That's one of my biggest like guitar learnings, and it sounds really obvious, but like amps and guitars can be suited to each other, and it's about finding the right like pair. Because at home I've got this PRS and this Hughes and Kettner kind of combo that's actually discontinued now. You can't buy it anymore, but they have this this Hughes and Kettner, and they work so well together. Like, I can't get, I mean, the PRS sounds great through lots of things, but like plug that into that and they're just like, oh, they sound great. So my recommendation, if you are shopping around for guitar amps and you don't have the money for a Kemper, is bring your guitar to the shop and play it through the amps and find like the pairing. It may mean that you need, if you have another guitar, you may need another amp. But what are you going to do? So yeah, I think that is long enough for one podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really enjoyed doing this. Actually, I'm gonna get back on it. It's one of my favorite bits of content to do, even though it's sort of probably the least popular thing that we do. But it's deep, I get to ramble about shit for ages. Yes, thank you so much for tuning in. We will speak soon. Toucan Echo Podcast is back, baby.